Okay, great. I see we have quite a number of people here today, so thank you very much for everyone for attending. My name is Ryan. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Ignite. I just want to say before we get started that you don't need to take any pictures of the screen or take any notes, as we'll be sharing Irene's presentation and we'll be sharing the recording of the whole session later this evening. Please do ask questions in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we'll make sure to cover them at the end. With that said, I'd love to introduce our speaker for today, which is Irene. Irene has many years of experience working within procurement across industries, as well as in large and complex organizations. She's held senior positions at Orkla, as well as helping many companies with procurement and supply chain as a senior consultant at EY. And most recently, she was the procurement director at G2 Ocean, where she led the procurement team, as well as leading some big change management projects across the organization. And one of those is what she'll be speaking about with us today. And most recently, Irene has just set up her own company, Desira Collective, where she acts as a strategic advisor to teams looking to increase their impact across their business. And today's session will be focused around how you can work more strategically with your largest and your most important suppliers. And that's by taking a key account manager approach. So great. With that said, Irene, I'd love to pass the floor over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate that you've taken your time to join this session. As Ryan said, my name is Irene Stendahl-Lønøy, and I'm the founder of Desira Collective. It's an independent consultancy company. With over 13 years working with procurement, both inside organizations and alongside them, I believe there's an untapped potential in most companies, and that's truly working with suppliers and the partners that we've chosen to buy products or services from. So today we're going to explore this idea together, how supplier collaboration, when done well, can become a true competitive advantage. We'll also talk about how to do it, because collaboration is not just a philosophy, it's a structure, it's a discipline, and it's a mindset. I want to start with this simple thought. The deal is just the beginning. In most companies, we spend enormous energy on that point. We plan, we negotiate, we build strong cases, and when the contract is finally signed, we feel like the work is done. But in reality, that's when the real work should start. There's so much untapped potential after the deal. Potential for better performance, for collaboration, for innovation, but we rarely use it. We often move straight into the next competition or the next negotiation. And the value we fought for in the contract slowly fades away. So the truth is, contracts don't create results, people do. And when we stop investing time after signing, we lose a huge part of the value we could have created together. So what if we changed how we work with supplier management entirely? What if supplier management became the new key account management? So when you think about key account management, what comes to mind? Dedicated teams, close collaboration, shared roadmaps, and long-term trust. We give our most important customers our very best attention because we know that's where growth comes from. So now imagine if we apply the same mindset to our suppliers. So instead of treating them as vendors to negotiate with, what if we treat them as partners to grow with? So in this, I'm not saying we should abandon everything we know about commercial management and negotiation and good deals, right? But I do think we need to focus more on the true value of these relationships, because we also need suppliers and vendors and partners that will survive in their environment. So let me give you an example from shipping to make this more concrete. In shipping, every hour counts. Every vessel day has a market value, and every day the vessel is standing still or you wait for something, you lose money. So the service providers that are supporting you at the port aren't just background support. They are the backbone of your operations. Their delivery and their experience directly impact how you work, right? So they directly impact how the customer's satisfaction is going. So when we realized that, what we did was start to think we have to treat them differently. So we built closer collaboration, we established shared goals, and we set up teams that focused on improvement rather than control. So if we agree that suppliers can be as critical as customers, the question becomes, how do we move from a partnership to actions that truly change outcomes? So let me share with you two examples of where we've chosen this approach and the result that it has created. The first case here is connected to outsourcing of some of the operations in the company. So we had also, as part of our operation, on paper, it made perfect sense. It was cost effective, clear content, strong service promise. But in practice, it didn't work. The service quality was low and the collaboration was poor. And actually both companies and both organizations were frustrated with this collaboration. So instead of replacing the supplier, because we chose it for a reason, right? We regrouped and we sat down together and said, what if we stop treating it as a transactional setup and start managing it like a key account? We created joint teams, not just procurement and operations, but people from both organizations, finance, innovation, and we focus on solving critical pain points together. The results, the service levels improved dramatically. We actually deepened our collaboration, and what was once seen as a weakness became a competitive advantage for the organization. The second case here is again a shipping example. It's from the core operation, as in with a port. We had a bit of issues with this setup. We had poor limit warehouse space at the port, so we couldn't unload the cargo when we were there. We had delays, we were waiting quite a lot. We had labor gaps. So we had to look at this. So instead of arguing with the supplier, we tried to turn it around and see what was happening on their side of the table. And the result was that we moved from a short-term service agreement to a long-term key account collaboration. We aligned our commitments, we shared data, we created improvement plans that benefited both sides, and the results were tangible. We had more warehouse space, we had less waiting time, we had more labor available, and we also improved our safety standards in a way we could be proud of. So both these examples have taught me something. When you build structure around collaboration, trust will follow. And when trust follows, the results come faster. So we've seen the impact supplier collaboration can create, but we also know we cannot do this with everyone. The level of collaboration is resource intensive. So just like in sales, where only a few customers become key accounts, we have to be deliberate with our suppliers. That's why we use a structured approach, 3 clear steps to help focus, manage, and deliver results. The first step is segmentation, building a fact-based and aligned foundation. The second step is the management approach, define the roles, responsibility, and collaboration models. What does this mean for us? And the last step is action. Align across the organization, consolidate, and go into execution. When presented like this in a webinar, it tends to become a bit too theoretical, but I can promise you that you can use it in your company. But you have to tailor it to what matters to you and your business. I'll try to show real-life examples like I've already done, but please at the end ask me questions as well. But first, let's go into the first step, segmentation. We often want to move straight into creating supplier strategies or segmentation model. But if we don't start with a solid understanding of the business, we risk to build the wrong focus. So the first step is about slowing down and building a fact-based foundation. So before we can segment suppliers, we need to know what we're really working with. That means consolidating data from multiple sources like spend data, contract coverage, and business relevant information, like strategic priorities, key customers, main bottlenecks, etc. In shipping, we looked at the key customers, our main ports, or operational bottlenecks, and the growth journey we were on. All of this together gives a true picture of what's important and where suppliers can create value in the business. The second step in this is verification. So once we have the analysis, we validate it with the business. So this is where procurement and operations or any other part of your business would sit together in workshops or one-to-one sessions to verify assumptions and to ensure that the segmentation makes sense in practice. Because what's strategic on paper and what you think might be very different to what's critical in daily operations. So the goal here is to create alignment and a shared understanding before you move into action. And this alignment ensures that when you later prioritize and do an alignment and consolidation across your whole corporation, everyone knows what's behind it, and it's easier that they all agree why these suppliers matters the most to your business. So step one is really about understanding before acting and grounding the decisions in facts, data, and business insight, not just procurement logics. In this slide, I've taken in an example pyramid. This is just an example of how a segmentation can look like. It could be 3 tiers, it could be 4 tiers. It depends on your business and your complexity. The percentages here represent numbers of suppliers, not spend, because that's not necessarily the driver for a strategic supplier, right? So it's more different things that come into mind when you do the segmentation. Okay, moving to the next step, it's the management approach. So now that we know which suppliers that matters the most, the next step is to decide how to manage them. One of the biggest mistakes companies making is treating every supplier the same, or you tend to, I've seen in several organizations, you tend to say, this is a strategic supplier, you're a strategic supplier, you're a strategic supplier, and you say it to a lot of suppliers, and then it doesn't really mean anything, right? So this step is about matching management effort to the strategic importance of the supplier. Our goal is to make sure that every supplier gets the right level of attention and governance, not too much and not too little. So the top tier suppliers are the ones that really drive growth and innovation. These are managed like key accounts with dedicated teams and regular senior touch points across procurement, operations, and the business. The focus here is partnership, joint value creation, and long-term development. The mid-tier suppliers are managed for consistency and performance. Category managers track KPIs, run structured reviews, and ensure that we're getting what we have agreed. The lower tier suppliers are handled through efficient processes, such as automation, standard contracts, and streamlined operation. Here it's about efficiency and compliance rather than building relationship. So the second step is bringing it all together. This tiered approach will give us a balance. It ensures that our top suppliers are managed strategically while we run a lean and efficient operation for everything else. So it's about creating the structure and managing your efforts. So this last step in this model is taking it from a theoretical discussion to action. So bringing it to practice. It's where everything becomes real. It's about turning segmentation and management principles into practical, measurable actions. And the first step here is consolidate and align. And it depends a bit on your company, right? And the structure you have. But here you bring together the segmentation results from all the business units and all the procurement categories. The goal is to create one unified view of your supplier's importance and share priorities across the company. And most likely you will slim the top of your pyramid, or you should slim the top of your pyramid so that you prioritize the ones that are truly most important. The next step is to convert this model into clear objectives and KPIs and engagement plans. Make sure that these are in line with operations so that they are reflected in their daily work. Before deciding when things will happen, you have to also assign roles and responsibilities and be clear on what it means to everyone. So every supplier tier should have a defined owner, whether it's a key account manager, a category lead, a procurement manager, or an operational contact. Because the clear ownership ensures accountability and continuous improvement. The final step is defining the timeline and milestones. With responsibilities in place and you have the priorities, you can set up, establish a review cycle, set up deadlines and key deliverables, and also a timeline of when you want to do so. Remember, it's a journey. Don't tackle everything at once. Start at one point and review it as you go along. But this creates a predictable rhythm for execution and helps you manage and measure your progress over time. So the last step is, as I said, moving from a desktop to action and putting it into life. So now that we've gone through the 3 steps of the model and looked at what it means in practice, this is how we can start working strategically with your suppliers. So even though I presented them as individual steps, in reality, they often overlap. In several cases, I've also implemented, because I've known the business quite well, and most of you probably also do, right? You already know which of your suppliers might come quite far up on this pyramid. So I've started to work with them as key accounts while setting up this process and framework in the organization. And the reason for that is because showing the organization what it really means and what I'm talking about when I've been talking about how we can create value out of collaboration. Because as you know, in procurement, it doesn't help to have a beautiful process on paper if you can't show anything along the way. But I promise you, when you start to review this with your supplier base and engaging people across your business, you will be surprised by the energy and the insight it creates and the bonds you create across different departments. And those conversations, it's where the real alignment starts, and it's something you should not underestimate. So when we talk about competitive advantage, we usually look inwards in our systems, our efficiency, our cost base, but the truth is that much of our strengths come from the people we choose to work with and how we choose to work with them. So if we treat suppliers as partners rather than vendors, we can create a new type of value, not just lower cost, but share growth, innovation, and resilience. I believe that this shift also would change the way it means to work within procurement. It moves us from being contract managers to business developers. People will drive growth, not just manage spend. So if there's one message I would like you to take away from today, it's this: competitive advantage is not something we create alone, it's something that we build together. So before we close, I want to thank you for being part of this discussion. I'm looking forward to the Q&A, Ryan. As you understand from me, supplier collaboration is not just a framework, it's a mindset. This has been a passion of mine for many years, and I've seen it in many different procurement organizations. And I've also seen the impact it makes if you can really get those partnerships to work. If today's session has sparked some ideas or reflection, I would love to continue the conversation. You can reach me through my email, scan the QR code to get to my LinkedIn, or ask Ryan to get my contacts if you don't already have it. But Ryan, I'm ready. Let's go for questions.
Great. Just while everyone is putting some questions in the chat, you're welcome to either chat or ask your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. But just while everyone is doing that, I just want to take the opportunity to tell you about our next webinar, which we'll be having on November 27th at 2 p.m. And in that session, we're going to cover some of the upcoming releases that we have here at Ignite. And the point of these releases is to help you demonstrate the impact of your work and work more strategically. So we'll cover some new releases, which will cover evaluating supplier performance, so you understand where you should spend and with who, how to turn some savings opportunities into actionable initiatives, and how to track and communicate the impact that you're creating across your organization. And Leslie should have dropped the link in the chat now, so anyone wants to join us for that, please feel free to register for that. And with that said, let's move over to some questions. I see we have some coming up here. I see one here from Magnus, which is, what are examples of differences between tier 1 to 3 and supplier differentiation and strategic/transactional? Are they the same?
Good question. Thank you for that, Magnus. What's the difference? So the difference between the tiers, right, is because if you have a strategic supplier and you look at a combination of spend, business growth, innovation, these suppliers are the ones that you truly want to collaborate with, right? You share objectives, you have a team that focus on them, you have follow-up, and you're thinking that instead of increasing your piece of the cake, you try to increase the total cake in total, right? So you're looking at it in a totally different way than when you negotiate a price contract for something that is more, it's not necessarily that important to you for your growth of your business. I'm not sure that answered the question, Ryan, because
you're welcome to respond as well, Magnus, in the chat afterwards, if you're happy with Irene's response or not. We can move on to Sandeep, who asks, when we say partnership with key suppliers, can that be joint venture or consortiums? What else could come here?
Yeah, it could be. That's also a good question, because I've been thinking about the same. Where's the difference, and what is the difference between a consortium or a joint venture and a key partnership, right? And I think sometimes it can start actually with a collaboration and move forward into a joint venture or something else, if that makes sense from a business point of view, right? But it's where a lot of as a company, right, we all have a lot of suppliers and partners. We're not supposed to do everything on our own. That's what we've been taught through business schools and so on. You have to stick to what you're good at. That's also why we partner up with someone. And some of these can help you, like for the logistics of your operations might be very important for you. You might want to partner up with the logistics function rather than having a transactional contract where you look at prices per unit, because the total value of getting that to work means much more for your business than the prices per stock SKU they move, or etc.
Good question. Chloe has a question here, and this is something that I thought about as you were speaking as well, Irene, which is, could you give an idea of how many key account managers you need compared to the number of sourcing and category managers in a procurement team, just so she has an idea of ratio?
Good question. If you look back to the pyramid I used in this, and most likely you will have some sort of the same setup. On top of the pyramid, it's only 1% of your supplier base, less than 1% of your supplier base, right? And so it depends on the number of suppliers you have, but I'm sure it's between 5 to 10. It depends, right? There's no magical number. This is not a math equation, so to say. But it depends on how many you put on the top of your pyramid, how many you want to grow with. And my recommendation would be to start this journey with some selected to show that it gives value, rather than starting with a lot of suppliers at the beginning. But I do think that this can change the setup of procurement organizations if we were to really tackle and work with supplier relationship management in a more strategic manner than what I've seen in many organizations, and creating these key accounts. You would move them probably away from the regular category management approach, right? So it could open up a new way of working with procurement, new roles.
To expand on that a little bit, Irene, if you're in a business where you have quite strict structures and you're not quite able to move straight away to this kind of different approach and potentially different organizational structure, are there any simple first steps that they could take to start adopting the approach? But that doesn't mean that you have to change the structure that you already have and work within the structure that you have.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this process in itself, right, It helps you and your procurement team also to prioritize, to get an overview of which of the suppliers are most important that we should use, because we all have a lot to do, right? We're more than enough to do. And sometimes we tend to not necessarily focus on the ones that you should be focusing on. So you can put it on top of what you're already doing, but that means also prioritizing, right? So you have to prioritize away some of the other work that you would have done before. And actually, that's what we've done in other organizations I've been working with, where we're not that many people, right? You have to use the organization. And some places, the key account manager will probably not be procurement. Maybe it's someone from the business. And the procurement manager, procurement director will be the commercial discussion partner within this team, right? So the key account manager doesn't necessarily have to be a procurement professional. It could be the business person that will be responsible for the growth in that segment, for instance, innovation or someone else.
Moving over again to Sandeep again with another question, which is, for identifying key suppliers in the business, do we need to build a strategy in the start, or can we do it through spend analysis, or is there another way to approach this?
If you can, again, what did you say, Brian?
Yeah, how, like, I guess it's asking like the starting point, I guess.
So when you start with this, you can, yeah. So I've started with it from 2 points of view, right? One is from a procurement. If you're a procurement director and leading a procurement team, you need to know who are your most important suppliers, what we're prioritizing our time on, etc. So I've started from that angle and then tried to, and with the desktop analysis of spend, biggest suppliers, biggest bottlenecks, etc. So I've done it from that way of working and looking at the contract coverage. But you can also start it from the strategic point of view, where you see the organization has some issues, operational issues, and you know your suppliers are a part of those issues, right? And that's has also been the starting point for some of these discussions and projects before.
Okay, great. And if that didn't answer your question, Sandeep, we can follow up with you after the webinar as well. Moving on to Vilma-Line, is this applicable for both direct as well as indirect procurement in your experience?
Yeah, I included everything actually when I've done this before, because sometimes, most likely your direct suppliers will become more strategic, but maybe some of your indirect also will become strategic because you might outsource to them or you might use them for something else that will help you grow, right? So yes, you should include all of your supplier base in this pyramid.
Great. And Pernilla asks, do you feel that this process requires more resources to be successful in?
No, I think it requires us to be more thoughtful of where we put our time and efforts. But you cannot do this with everyone, right? So you have to be deliberate in where you're doing it and which suppliers you're trying to create a partnership with, because otherwise it would just be an exercise where you meet and you have meetings and you build a pipeline, but you don't really do anything, right? You have to invest in such a relationship. So if you look at it from that perspective, it will take more resources, but it will give more value to your organization. But I think it's about also priorities.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. I think procurement teams have more work than ever and need to prioritize as hard as possible with the resources that you have. A question here from Jing, which is, I have one question about data sharing. Do you have a great framework on how to share data with suppliers? And I guess the broader concept here is about transparency, and how much transparency do you need between suppliers and procurement teams?
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to share everything, right? What you have to share with them is the same objectives that you have for this partnership, what you're trying to get out of it, right? You have to go to the discussion table in a different setup. If there are any issues from your side in terms of forecasting or getting things delivered on time to your factory, or I don't know, depending on your business and industry, right? And and from the supplier side, they have issues with forecasting and they don't know when to produce and their cycle times are like this, you might need to share data, right, to get this partnership up and running. But you share what's important in this setup and what's important to tackle for your joint growth opportunities.
Great. I see an interesting one here from Marianne, which asks, if we have some level of segmentation on the supplier base where we spend more or less effort depending on the segmentation, should we still have the same performance requirements of them all, or do we have different expectations depending on how we've tiered them?
Yeah, I would say you have different expectations depending on how you tier them. And that again goes back to your industry, right? But the lower tiers should be something that you could more or less, and maybe in the future also handle more automatically, where you have the contracts, where it goes automatically and the price discussions and so on has been done. You have the catalog, you do request POs, it's in your systems, right? But the more strategic partners, you still probably will have POs with them, but that's not necessarily the discussion you're having with them. That's something else. It's connected to we're going into new markets. We need logistics support in this market. Can you help us set that up? That's a different discussion than what's the price per SKU you handle at this warehouse that we've had for many years, right? So you have different expectation and different measures, and you'll have to measure something that's probably a bit difficult, because when you let's say from fast-moving consumer goods, for instance, we worked with innovation suppliers helping create new products into the markets, right? Because you needed to be fast into the supermarkets with your products. But how do you measure that partnership was the reason for the 5% growth on your top line, right? It's very difficult. So you have to measure probably more activities, and you also have to measure the growth within what you're buying from the supplier. I don't know. That's depending on the type of business you have.
Great. And Emma asked a question which I think you'll find very interesting and something that you have a lot to say about, Irene, which is around change management. So what are the challenges that you met when trying to implement this? Because you can't implement this within procurement alone. Was there a change in your way of working externally and internally? And how did that work out?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And there's challenges, right? Because this is a change in mindset. So one thing is a change in mindset for your procurement function, right? You have to think, oh wow, we can grow with this company. It also is a change of mindset from the supplier side, because they've been used to having a counterpart that's been discussing and negotiating in a different manner. And now they're saying, let's talk to each other and trust each other so we can grow together. It's a very different mindset. And I met that several times where we came from a point of view where we've been negotiating really tough. It doesn't mean that to where we're going to grow together. So that's a journey, a maturity journey that takes some time. And the other part is the challenges internally, right? So that's why I said it's important maybe to try to start with some key examples while you're building this model, to show the value to the top management quite early on and get them to understand that this goes into the core operation. So when we looked at shipping, as I said, for an example, we went to lots of different ports all over the globe, and some of them more often than others. And if we were waiting a lot at that port, and if we didn't have the opportunity to move out of it fast, it created a real bottleneck for us in our operations, and it hurt our customers at the end. So if you got to connect it to the customer side and the growth side, it's easier to have that conversation. But it's I'm not saying it's easy, and we did some mistakes, right, in this journey, and it is a journey.
Thank you. And everyone, welcome to continue asking questions. But I guess on when you're doing a big change management project, do you have any tips or advice on how you can ensure that you actually implement these initiatives?
You have to, like in any other change process, you have to find the good advocates that can help you that have that strong footprint in the organization. But really through this alignment process and when we did the desktop analysis and we did the verification with the business, that's really where the magic happens. So don't underestimate that. Come in there, and that's good for procurement. You're really good at that, right? We're really good at bringing the facts to the table. We know who's our biggest supplier, how much we spend, when they deliver, etc. Right? So you can bring all that information to the business people that kind of knows, but they don't have the facts. And when you bring that together and have that discussion with them, it's really magical, and that's where the alignment starts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see we have one here from Adam, which I guess talks more about the supplier perspective, which is, and this is something that you really want to do, but how do you handle it when you have a supplier that's growing slower than you? And despite the guidance and the change in the change of way of working with them, have you handled that, or how would you handle that if there was a bit more resistance from them?
From the supplier?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to answer on such a specific case when I don't really know the background, but I would try to elevate the discussion within the supplier's management team and to see if you can lure off that interest with them. Because that's also what we do in procurement, right? We do commercial discussions, and we do business development when we have these discussions. So I would try to get the right person at the table from the counterpart, and try to see if there's any partnerships alignment higher up, maybe from your side and also from the supplier side.
And I see we have one from Stefan here, which is, what about suppliers in China or India, for example? Do you think this approach with partnership would work with them?
Yeah, why not? If you have a partner, a lot of companies around the globe have manufacturing partners in different countries, and I'm sure they work with them in a different way. But it doesn't mean that all of your suppliers that you buy from should be strategic, right? So we're going again back to the priorities. So I don't necessarily believe that the country they are in are a hinder for this way of working.
Great. And then one from me, which is, there's many different kinds of value that you can create when you change to this approach. But do you have any concrete examples or examples of concrete business value that either you've been able to deliver in your work, or what other businesses potentially could deliver through this?
Yeah, so we, from the examples that I've shown today, we have delivered cost efficiency throughout the full operational, or through the operations of what we've been doing, right? And we also delivered consistency towards customers and increased customer satisfaction. But I know from research that it's also been driving growth for companies as well. But it's again back to, it's difficult to measure. So how do you pinpoint that this exactly has driven that growth in the top line of your company? But yes, for both of these examples that I showed you today, has both delivered cost improvements and also increased customer satisfaction. So it's not only the partnership for partnership's sake.
It actually delivers business results as well, which is fantastic to hear. I noticed that the questions are slowing down, so I think this is a good opportunity for us to wrap it up here. And I would just like to say thank you very much to everyone for joining. I hope to see you at our next webinar. And thank you very much, Irene, for your very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.